Seems like you're handling the weather there in your neck of the woods very good.
It's been good and very hot for the last 3 days.
Okay. So first question to you this afternoon, Brother Mike, is do you care to share about your childhood, your growing up, who you were, where you're from?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. I was born in Port of Spain, Trinidad. I was born to a family of my parents and 9 children. I'm the second of 9. My early life was where I was born in Laventille. And then later on, around age 7, I moved to a fishing village in Trinidad in the west of Port of Spain called Caranage. So I was born in Laventille, moved to Caranage, went to school in Diego Martin, which is another village in the western side of Trinidad. And after school, I spent some time working on a dredger, dredging the harbor for about 6 months. That was my first real job. And after that, I joined the Army in Trinidad, the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment. So I spent 15 years in the regiment in the capacity of being a drummer. A drummer is a musician, a military musician, the military musician that keeps the time, the army on time, tells the men when to wake up, when to go to sleep, and when the parades are coming on, 15 minutes, half an hour before the parades, when the commanding officer is in camp, when the president or the prime minister leaves his office, and when he returns. A drummer is a very important individual. And when I became a Christian later on, I saw the importance of drummers. The drummer's role in the army of God is the men who use to sound the ram's horn when it's time to call different elders, different elder groups and captains for the Lord's people. That's the symbol. The book of Numbers tells you a lot about the role of the drummer. The drummer will also be the person who will alert the entire camp, the Christian camp, the camp Israel, when the enemy is about to attack. The drummer will be on the wall with the watchman, and when they sound the call, the men know it's time to dress for battle and when to prepare for the charge or to defend. So that was my work in the army as a musician in the drum corps. And then in my middle years, around my 30s, I left the army for other things. I wanted to be something else. I wanted to be a Christian, a real Christian. I was a Christian, but not, it was limited. I had to be out of the army to be a real Christian, because the army life is rough for Christian people. Desmond Doss.
So, Brother Mike, what do you mean you wanted to become a real Christian?
Well, I grew up knowing about God as a Roman Catholic. My parents ensured that we had those values to understand who God is and, you know, what we need to be. And the better persons are the persons who understand their role in life in service to Christ. But we had limited knowledge. And not until I left the army, or not until I decided to leave the army after the 15 years of service, just in my mid-30s, I was suggesting to myself, now it's time to be a Christian. I couldn't be the person that I wanted to be while in the army, so I decided I'm going to be a Christian by seeking baptism. So that is what I wanted to be, a true Christian. I didn't want to be the Christian who can continue to live like I was living in the army. You know, the army life is the standard. You say things, you speak things, you swear, you drink things, you smoke things. That was the end. I needed to put an end to that and live like a true Christian. And the army is not conducive to that.
So when and how did you get in contact with the Christian faith, the Seventh-day Adventist message?
Well, it's very interesting the way got in. I knew Adventists on the street where I lived, where I grew up, and but they weren't really evangelizing us. They may have given up on us. My father was an alcoholic, and so I'm coming from a household where alcohol is frequently in use. And my father was a smoker. He was a good man in every sense, but those were the traits that he had. And so nobody witnessed us to tell us about the Adventist message. So now that you ask, how did I become an Adventist? It's not until maybe when I was around 30, 31 years old, I actually got in touch with some pathfinders in another city where I live, another village where I live, Sandy Grande. For those who know Trinidad, Sandy Grande is in the east now, way up in the east, going towards Toco, northeast region. The Pathfinders had a drum corps, but they had nobody to train them. And as I mentioned before, my background was in music in the army, so I could teach how to march, I could teach all the drills, I could teach drummers how to play, so I could teach a drum corps. And they asked me if I knew anyone. I said, well, I could help. And I got authorization from my commanding officer, and I spent 2 days a week with this group of pathfinders in Sandy Grande. And after 3 months, they had a very efficient and effective drum corps. So they were known as the Sandy Grande Pathfinders Drum Corps. And they did all the big anti-drug marches in Trinidad, leading the parades. And I was proud to be part associated with them. They had invited me to church on many occasions for community guest day. But as a soldier, you know how to get out of things. And to get out of things, there's a particular skill we refer to, meaning you know how to avoid commitments in many ways. So I never committed to those invitations, but I got numerous invitations. And always found an excuse. I might be working because of the uncertainty of military life. Anyways, when I left the army, I met my in-laws, my former in-laws in Toronto, Canada, and they invited me to listen to some of the music they were playing as a chorus, as a choir. And from there, I started to read some books that I was exposed to called Bible Answers. Bible Answers, and it was my pocket book for traveling on the subways in Toronto, just as a newcomer. And from that experience, the Bible Answers answered a lot of the questions that I had, because I left the army wanting to be a Christian, but without guidance. I've been to the Pentecostal church seeking baptism, responded to altar calls, but no one actually took me up on the altar calls. I went to the Baptist church, same thing. I went to the Jehovah's Witness on 2 occasions when I was in New Jersey in transition from Trinidad to Canada. I spent 2 weeks in New Jersey. And those were things that I was exposed to. And when I realized that this message that I found in this little book called Bible Answers, a booklet actually, Bible Answers, it answers the questions that I was seeking. And then I desired baptism. And that could have been September to December of 1986. And in 1987, January, the first altar call that was made, I responded. When I responded, they told me that the pastor is going to get back to me to talk about things in regards to the desire to be baptized. Now, remember, I wanted to be baptized since I was in Trinidad in 1986 in the Pentecostal church. And this is 1987. I'm in Toronto, still wanting to be baptized, but not successfully getting that experience. Eventually, in April, there was going to be a crusade, and they were reserving me for that crusade, but I never knew that's what they were doing. And when the pastor asked me all the questions relating to the baptismal vows, I said to him, I said, anything that you ask me, the answer is yes. He tried to do
Yes.
the vows.
Amen. Amen.
He really tried to do the vows. He
Yes.
said, so do you accept this? Do you accept that? I said, anything you ask me, the answer is yes. Because I was studying, I was reading Bible answers. I was convinced that this is what I want since a year ago. And now you're asking me, and I've been waiting since January. I made a new commitment from January 87, and this is April. I said, anything you ask me, the answer is yes. He had to give up. And that was 1987. I got baptized April 19th. And I've been a member of the Berea Seventh-day Adventist Church congregation ever since. Sometimes stubborn individuals like myself who came from a certain type of background, military and a musical background, when we decide what we want, once we achieve that, we can live with that comfort knowing that I have achieved what I wanted. I wanted to be a Christian, and that is what I wanted. And it's still the most precious thing to me. So the Pathfinder movement is what led me first to be connected with Adventists. And I'm just a Pathfinder, not uniformed. I don't use uniforms anymore since I left the Army. I said, no more uniforms. I said, but my heart is with the Pathfinders. So that's how I became a Seventh-day Adventist Christian.
Okay, because you answered all the question I was about to ask you. Because I was going to ask you, why you've been in touch with the Pathfinders, working with the church all along in Trinidad. Why it took so long for you to wait until you got to Canada? But you answered all the questions. You preempted me. That
Yes,
yes, interesting.
but
Interesting stuff.
I could give you something that relates to that too. What happened while I was in the Army? I was a stand-up comedian in the Army. I can turn anything into humor because God gave that ability to me, that talent. And I would cheer up the troops whenever we are confined to camp. We will have those kind of moments where we can just be, just as soldiers would be. So I was a stand-up comedian type. And I was exposed to the book, The Great Controversy, by my former in-laws who I met in Toronto. They came to Trinidad. They were originally from Canada. They moved to Trinidad and they moved back to Canada. But on the journey back to Canada, they left two things with my former in my former life with my former family. They left the pots and pans, which is the health ministry they left for me. Then they left all the books they came with. But the book that stood out the most was The Great Controversy. I never knew about it, never knew its origin. But while I was living in Sandy Grande, I would normally do a cleaning, like every 3 months, clean the bookshelf. So all the dust that will normally accumulate, I will just go to the bookshelf on a Sunday and just blow off the dust. And the book that always attracted me was this green hardcover book named The Great Controversy. But it might have had some other name, maybe The Triumph of God's Love or The Cosmic Conflict or something like that. And I would just take that book off the shelf next to my stereo, blow the dust off from the pages on the top that is exposed to where dust will settle. And I'll flip to the very last paragraph in that book. And that last paragraph of The Great Controversy, I have seen and read the most beautiful paragraph that I've ever read in that book. And I would do that every 3 months until I memorized that. I used to be in drama. I used to be in theater. I acted in films in Trinidad. I acted on television and drama clubs. I played music on television, spoke on the radio, did all these things. But I've never had that beautiful paragraph, such a beautiful paragraph in my life to read. So when I read it, it appealed to me. It says, the great controversy is ended. Sin and sinners are no more. The entire universe is clean. One pulse of harmony and gladness beats throughout the vast creation. From him who created all flows life and light and gladness. Throughout the realms of illimitable space, all things animate and inanimate in its unshadowed beauty and perfect joy declare that God is love. So it spoke about from the greatest atom to the minute, from the greatest world to the minutest atom, all will declare that God is love. That is the power of that paragraph, the last paragraph in the book, The Great Controversy by Ellen White. I memorized that paragraph, and instead of being a stand-up comedian in the army camp, whenever we are confined, I will get on a platform, just a colloquial platform, not a stage or anything, in the dorm, in the barrack room, and I would just say, let me just tell you guys about this paragraph. And I would recite the great controversy in a theatrical manner. And they would be so impressed. And I'll say to them, that's the greatest paragraph I've ever read in all my life. So that book that my in-laws left me, and the pots and pans, I believe that's the health message in the pots and pans, and the book, The Great Controversy. Ellen White said if that book is distributed to the people in the world, spread like the leaves of autumn, it will bring a lot of people to Christ. So I had the Pathfinder's influence and the Great Controversy and pots and pans that led me to become a better person in transitioning from the army to civilian life as a soldier for Christ. That's my testimony. I'm not hearing you.
Okay. So how did your friends and family react to your conversion to the Seventh-day Adventist faith?
Oh, it was very good. The response from my family was very good. No, I got baptized in April '87. I was a student in Toronto studying electronics and technology and recording engineering and so on. So that's my background skill, one of my skills. And when we had a break between the first and the second year in September of 1987, I took out of my tuition money for the second year. I had just completed a Revelation seminar, just was a student of the Revelation and Daniel seminar. And I took the money that I had to pay tuition for the second year, some of the money, and said, I'm going to Trinidad. I'm going to ensure that my household, my mother's household, my father's household, my siblings, that they will hear of this beautiful message that we never heard. And I went there in Trinidad and spent 3 weeks. And for that 3 weeks, I was like, I was almost like Evangelist Michael Joseph. They even recognized people on the street where I lived at that time, where I grew up. They would say things like, whoa, Mikey is now a preacher man. Because they know me as a musician, as a soldier, and now here I am. I could tell them about the book of Revelation. So they addressed me like a preacher man. So I got a little more respect in that sense. But my household, my parents, I want them to get off the pork and to learn of the gospel. And so my mother is a very educated person, and she's the key foundation part of our family. And she saw the wisdom. So that was 1987. My sister came to Toronto to reside in Toronto in 1988. When she came, she said, okay, something I want to understand. Now we're moving from a Catholic background and moving them from Catholicism to Adventism. My sister said, all I need to understand really is what is the difference between Saturday and Sunday. And she being a charismatic Catholic person, when she saw it, she was ready for baptism. And then, Amen. Praise the Lord. Amen. And my mother too heard the gospel from what I shared, what my sister shared, and she was inclined. So by 1990, 2 years later, after my sister became an Adventist, 2 years later, Fitzhenry came to Trinidad. and had a major crusade in Trinidad, and my mother got baptized.
Praise the Lord.
Amen. And then she had a whole lot of string, all her grandchildren, maybe about 5 or 6 of them got baptized also. So the gospel can move from one person down a family line, like Abraham's household, and people will follow if they see the truth. The key is live the best you can and be consistent in living that truth. So that's how my family accepted it. My
But
friend,
Brother Mike, as you may be aware by now, it's a difficult thing to stay in the faith. You've been tested from time to time. And I presume, what have you done to keep you in the faith for 33 years? What have you done?
by the God's,
What
by
are the
the
things that keep you strong?
okay, by the grace of God, and this, my God gave us gifts so that we can practice the gifts and talents that He has endowed us with. He has given me the gift of a pastoral ministry, but I'm not in any way claiming to be a pastor, but I understand some of the things. When pastors evaluate my gifts and talents, they always come back and say, "You're gifted as a pastor." Now, I've always been teaching. God has given me a very good understanding of the scriptures, very good understanding. He has gifted me with the ability to analyze with my limited knowledge, because I don't have a background in Greek or Hebrew studies or Old Testament specific studies or ancient history. So I don't take the gospel to people in that context. But when I share with them from the layman's perspective, they will understand and they know how to make decisions based on Christ and his appeal to them. I also use my talents as helping people develop the technical ministries in churches. I've helped.
I'm a beneficiary of that. I know that I learned a few things from you being in Canada.
Well, praise the Lord. Yes, I remember you used to come to my class in a sense. Yes. But a lot of churches have actually benefited from the technical skills that I have developed and by God's grace. And I was actually always avoiding being a preacher, though I can do that role. And in 2007, I was preparing to go to a crusade series, an evangelistic series, mission trip to Africa in Kenya with one of the local pastors here in Toronto. And I was going as a technician. So I equipped myself with recording devices, digital microphones, and the works. And the day before we boarded the plane, which is a Sabbath evening around 6 o'clock, the pastor called me and said, "Brother Mike, I'm sad to let you know that I would not be going." He would not be going. He was supposed to go as the evangelist. We had meetings and planning sessions, and he was supposed to be the evangelist. He said, "Brother Mike, as of today, I'm appointing you to be the evangelist in Kenya." So I got an appointment to preach for 2 weeks in Kenya. The day before I left for Kenya, that's when I knew that so I had no messages prepared. I had nothing prepared because I was going as a technical support person. But God always depend and design on minute men and minute women, minute people. In season, out of season, you can be called to give a reason for your faith, and we must be prepared. So I grabbed one of the books that I used to teach the pastor's class, assist in teaching the pastor's class at my congregation, a book called Steps to Jesus, a little booklet, but it's condensed, is the condensed version of the 28 fundamental beliefs of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. That's what we will share with new believers. And I knew the content, and I thought, well, this will be my sole focus to help to create a series of about 14 lessons, 14 studies, 14 sermons. And so when we arrived in Kenya the following day, which was around October of 2007, when we arrived, the people who came to meet us, they said, we were looking for a white man. We thought it was a white man, but it's one like us. You are just like us. So I felt comfortable. And we spent the Monday evening, because it's 24 hours to get to Kenya. We left 6 o'clock Sunday, and we arrived Monday at 7 p.m. in Jomo Kenyatta Airport. When we got to the place where we were going to stay for the next 3 days in Nairobi, the very first night around 11:30, they said, we've been observing your mannerisms, and we would like to give you a name, an African name, so that you can be that brother that you are. They said, we will wait until tomorrow and we will have a committee, we will consult, and we will determine what name we should give to you. And then we will come back and propose it to you. So expect that going to happen tomorrow, which is going to be Tuesday night. Well, Tuesday came and they returned and they said, okay, we have looked at you, we have assessed, and we have come to the conclusion as a committee, this is about 14, 15 persons, elders from the conference and so on, from the Nyamira conference. They said, we would like to give you the name Kibagendi. Kibagendi. They said Kibagendi means, the meaning of Kibagendi in their language, which is in Swahili. There's another language because there are 42 different tribes in Kenya and many different dialects, but that's what I remember. They said the name Kibagendi means one who has crossed over the ocean, and we have looked at you and you have some traits and behaviors like our grandfather. And the grandfather, he lived in the house at that time. So I've seen him, I've seen Mr. Kibagendi, and they said, okay, so now that we have proposed the name to you, will you accept that name? And then they waited for my response. And I had no qualms about it. I said, I will accept the name. And they basically had a prayer session. And they said, when you go into the village, which is going to be 6 hours drive from Nairobi, the next day we're leaving, that is the Wednesday, we're leaving to go into Nairobi, into the village in Kizi village, which is where the Kizi tribe resides. They said, we will be sending you along with this name as Pastor Michael Joseph Kibagendi. So I was sent into the village and introduced to the people with that name. And my African brothers in Toronto, they refer to me as Kibagendi.
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 So, welcome to you. Is there an experience since you've been a Seventh-day Adventist that has really shaken your faith and caused you to wonder, am I at the right place? Should I stay? Is there an experience?
I guess if I search deeply, I could find some experiences, not in relation to the doctrinal standards of the church, because I love the message, I love the ministries, but as anything else in a family, sometimes you meet people who can be a test to your faith. In the family of the disciples that Jesus walked with, those 12, there was always that test. Judas did not present an easy test. I'm not saying that anybody should be considered Judases, but I've met what Jesus referred to as hypocrites. But I promised myself never to call anyone a hypocrite, because I will be fulfilling that role, because I will become a judge, and I'm not supposed to be judging. Judgmentalism is not my trait. I don't need to be a judge. But I've had experiences where I felt like I need to step away from certain brethren at a certain time for my own salvation, because their practices were such as what the hypocrites would do. You see, we still struggle with with the island mentality in the global experience of church. Some of us who came from a small island, we are marginalized. Some of us who came from a big island, we have an ego the size of the island. And so I've learned that my island, Trinidad, has this particular size, and there are countries that are smaller than Trinidad in the Caribbean, and there are countries that are larger. I'm so thankful that the type of person I am, I can speak out about injustice, and I could articulate injustice when I've seen it, but I try not to be judgmental and condemn people for whatever they're doing. I just highlight it and say this is something that can cause division within the church. And I think my ministry is one that unites people. When I was a head elder at the local congregation, my role, I said, I feel I'm impressed and I'm put in this position to reunite the church. And it was achieved. I believe I achieved that unification because we were so divided that at points in time, some elders were not happy with the pastor, some members weren't happy with the pastor, and there was those kind of divisions, those kind of schisms. But I didn't let that shake me. I said, I'm going to stand and assist in reuniting the congregation. And I say today, the congregation is reunited. It isn't perfect. And I've since stepped away from the head eldership so that I can focus on other things to help develop other ministries and my personal life. But yes, there will be times when your faith is going to be shaken, but you don't have to be shaken out if you know what the last days will bring. There's a shaking. People within the fold will cause you to feel like you need to leave, but don't leave. Stand and be part of the fold, despite the challenges that you face.
Okay, so that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, what would you say is the difference between the years in the army, years when you were not just going to church and you really wanted to be a Christian, and now you are a Christian? What is the difference? Significant difference, you would say?
Okay. So in my in my early years, when I was still a teenager going to high school, or just before high school, I was an altar boy. We, as young boys, we became altar boys because we saw the opportunity to serve. So we would be up early in the morning, and we were like more pranksters as altar boys, I would say. Pranksters because the school had a unique mango tree and a sapodilla tree. And when you're an altar boy, you are around those trees around 5:30 in the morning, and you're getting the best fruits. So the principal, the elementary school principal, he couldn't get the best fruits that he waited for all year because we, as altar boys, we are coming early and we're doing a sweep. So we get the best mangoes, the best sapodillas, and he used to address it from the principal podium. He would say, "There are some boys who are, always eating and stealing my mangoes. We aren't stealing. We just passing through the school area and picking up mangoes. But we go to church, we do our altar boy role, and then we return home." So we were more like pranksters. And we grew up in a fishing village, as I mentioned. So on St. Peter's Day, we would be on the launches, getting those privileged places to go to serve. Then, when I joined the army will have church parades, and there's only two churches you can go to in the army: the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church. So we were compelled to go to church, dress up in your ceremonial, and you go to church parade at least once every 3 months, once every quarter, and that was what Christianity was like for me. But I know that wasn't sufficient. And as I mentioned, I was a dance band musician. I played in the parties and dances. So we would be coming up 2, 3 in the morning, 4, 5 in the morning, 5, 6 in the morning after playing a fete, carnival fete. And so we just drop into the church just to go to church. But it was so insignificant. There was no real reason to continue that life, that I knew there's something more needed. And when my daughter, my eldest daughter, when she was 9 years old, she said, she asked the question, how come we don't go to church like other people? And I realized that she is beginning to have the need for Christian experience. And then I started seeking church in a serious manner. And I knew that I had to make changes. And so based on that request, I started going to the Pentecostal church because I really couldn't go back to the Catholic church. I didn't have any connections. And transitioned to the Pentecostal. And then I came to Canada shortly after, and started going to the Adventist church. So the difference was because the Adventist church is a more fuller commitment than the shallow commitment of my previous experience in the Army and before the Army as an altar boy.
Okay, what would be your counsel to someone who does not have any interest with God? Someone who says there is no God. They cannot see the relevance of God. What would be your counsel to them?
That's a challenge. For someone who says that there is no God and they don't see the need to make any commitment to God, it all depends on my relationship with them. If it's someone I will only see on this one occasion, just a passing, maybe just one encounter, I wouldn't try to convince them. I will not try to convince them. I will say that there may not be a God that you know of, that you understand, but there's going to come a time when either your child or a friend, dear friend, will need God, and they will be depending on you to tell them what you know about God. So while you can stand here now and say that there is no God, be prepared for the day when that individual may ask you, what is your thought about God? And be prepared to have a good answer. And I have an experience that I could tell you about shortly on that. So if it's someone I'm going to see on a regular basis, I will let them speak about what their beliefs are. If they believe in God, if they don't believe in God, it is still a belief. And so if you have a belief, we could talk about it if you're interested in speaking about it. And maybe over time, you may have a difference in opinion or a different perspective, but I'll tell you what I know. I'll go back to what I just suggested, that I was once asked if I'm a Christian. I was in the Army at that time. This was 1980. 1980, I was working on the President's Guard. We were stationed in Tobago for 21 days. So I would take my trumpet that I used to play in the dance bands with and go to the botanical gardens in Tobago, right in Scarborough, and I will just blow my horn and have a good time because a sloping hillside and you're overlooking the waterfront. So I'm blowing my guts out, as I would say. And this lady who was having a mental health struggle, an obvious mental health struggle, she was talking to herself, arguing with herself, disputing things. She was having a hard time. Young woman, she could be about 20 or 18 to 20. I was just around, maybe just around 31 years old. And she said, when she finished talking to herself, she came and interrupted my practice. I was dressed in my Army fatigues. And she just said, sir, are you a Christian? Are you a Christian? And she asked me that question, and that is a deep soul-searching question. And I thought for a minute, if I'm a Christian, whether I'm a Christian or whether I'm a Muslim. The reason why I had to do some thinking, one of my Army colleagues, he had an accident in an Army Jeep going up Fort George in St. James, Trinidad. That's a very steep hill. He was a signaler, and he was taking ration food for the supper. And when he was going up there, he lost control of the Jeep and he overturned and the Jeep went down the hill and he survived. And after his survival, he became a Muslim. That was his testimony to me. And he used to promote Islam. So when we worked night duties, he would be just proclaiming Islam theories, and he would bring his Quran and compare it, and he would be educating and re-educating, and I almost became a Muslim. I bought my Quran in 1975.
Wow.
I was convinced, but I had a Quran that was, one side was the Islamic Arabic writings and one side is English. And I'll compare. And there's a prayer in the Quran that is very similar to the Lord's Prayer, Our Father which art in heaven, Matthew. That prayer is the most beautiful worded prayer. Words have a beautiful relationship with me. Like the Great Controversy, that Quranic reading, it's a beautiful expression, it's a beautiful prayer. And when the young woman came to me and asked me, sir, are you a Christian? I took my trumpet out of my mouth, my fugal horn, and I thought for a minute, am I a Christian or am I a Muslim? I wasn't sure because I hadn't made a commitment yet. I was still in the army. And I said, I'm a Christian. And that's the moment I decided to be a Christian. That is the moment I had to make a decision whether I'm a Christian or not. So like the person who will ask the question, and do they believe in God or not? There comes a time when somebody will ask you that question. Are you a Christian? Do you believe in God? And you will have to search deep within. And when I said to her, I'm a Christian, I was convinced I was a Christian. I wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist yet. I was still not going to church on a regular basis, but I was more inclined to Islam. But I knew that I couldn't be an Islamic person. I could not commit to Islam. I couldn't. I had friends who were in Islam and they were part of the coup in Trinidad. Eventually, I had left Trinidad already, but I went to school and my mechanics were aligned with that same Islamic group. The point is, I had to make a decision that moment whether I'm a Christian or not. And without being baptized, I said, I'm a Christian. She said, okay. And then she commanded me, she said, pray with me right now. And the prayer that I had to pray was the Muslim prayer, because that is what was present in my mind. But then after that prayer, I said the Lord's Prayer, Our Father which art in heaven. And then as I finished praying, she kissed me on my lip, just a firm kiss, nothing sensual, like a thank you. And she walked away. And I was saying to myself, wow, that was a very interesting moment. The next time I saw that girl, I was back in Trinidad, that young girl, she was about 20. I saw her in the bus terminus down on South Key, or however they call it now, where the bus terminus is in Trinidad, in Port of Spain. She was walking barefooted in the bus yard where the bus terminus is, where the ground is black and the sole of her feet were black like tar. And I was going to my home in Sandy Grande, just awaiting the bus to go to Sandy Grande. And I said, my goodness, that young lady is now fully staring mad. She was struggling with something. That's why she asked me for prayer. I didn't hesitate. I just had to determine if I'm a Christian and how I should pray. And she, in her struggles, when I saw her about a month later, I said, my goodness, somebody must have taken advantage of her and her faith was shaken. Those are incidents that I will never forget. And so I don't know what became of her after that, but I have since chosen to remain a Christian. So if anytime anyone asks me or they deny there is a God, I have a testimony to let them know the day will come when someone will ask you and you have to have an answer. Yes, there is a God. I'm certain there is a God. So that's my response to that.
Yeah. There are times when members of our church, members of this great movement, the Seventh-day Adventist movement, lose faith. give up and become aggressive to the church. They don't want to hear about the church anymore. How would you reach out to someone like that?
Okay. You know, God has given me some opportunities to experience certain things. In the 1990s, the Adventist Church went through a very rough period with unsupportive independent ministries. These unsupportive independent ministries culminated in the experience of people like David Koresh in Waco, Texas in the 1990s. The people who were known as shepherd rods and so on, these are folks who challenged the church in many ways. And so I was given the opportunity to record a series of sermons by one of the theologians from Andrews University, because I used to do video productions. And after recording those sermons, that series, a weekend series, I've heard the messages and understood the context of historic Adventism, how the church has always experienced these things from way back in the early formation days of the Seventh-day Adventist movement in the 1860s. And I've seen from the messages that I recorded all the scriptures and all the supporting texts that I can use, and not just scripture texts, but historical documents. And I became a very astute student. And I knew how to defend the church against these movements. So when people came and said the Adventist Church was things that were of low repute, they will say, this is Babylon and all these different sort of terms. I had content that I could refer to. And I was given the mandate by the Ontario Conference president at that time, Elder Bacchus. He said, Brother Joseph, you can go and you can share as a layman, share the message with those people who are in different congregations across Ontario and share with them what it's like to remain faithful to the Adventist movement. Because the quest at that time was to divert money from the treasury, the storehouse of God, to these little private ministries. So they were unsupportive. And the North American division, I believe, or the General Conference, had put out a very big document, like a binder, on what should be the guidelines for these ministries, how we should function with them. But they are unsupportive. And so I was able to preach in about 6 different congregations within Ontario about how to address the issue of unsupportive independent ministries in the Adventist Church. So I know from experience where I'll find content to help people who are drifting from the church, how to get them to return to the church. And I was privileged to do that for others, young men and women who, well, at least one young man, one elder and his family, who was about to drift. I said, just be aware that these things exist. Do not be persuaded. They will lead you out. So hold fast to these things. So I know, based on the word of God and the history of the church and resources available, how to prevent people from losing their foundation and their grasp on the church so that they don't leave the ark of safety. And sometimes we will encounter troublers in Zion, people who will try to disrupt and disturb the smooth function of the church. But Ellen White gave us counsel on how to deal with the troublers of Zion. Anyone who wants to take a look up can look up troublers in Zion. I haven't looked at it recently, but troublers in Zion. Which you advise, sometimes we may have to, when we are fishing, cast the net and you bring everything in that comes up in the net. And sometimes you have to throw everything overboard and cast the gospel net again, because then the church can become corrupted with a bad catch. But it's not us to judge them. We just have to ensure that we know what the fishing experience is like. And we grew up in fishing villages. We know how fishermen throw the nets and how they treat the catch. They know what to throw back and what to keep. But we just continue to bless the Lord.
Just before we wrap up today, I have two surprise questions for you.
Okay.
What is your favorite text?
My favorite text.
Verse of scripture, yes.
My favorite text is one that I normally refer to most every day. Psalm 32, verse 8. When I was reading through the Bible in my early Christian years, and then maybe I need to start doing that again to go back and read through again. The text, I met so many beautiful texts, but the one that stood out that I've always returned to in good times, in tough times, Psalm 32, verse 8. It says, I will instruct thee, and I will teach thee in the way that thou shalt go. I will guide you with mine eyes. So like as a parent, our parents, when you were kids, we're doing a little mischievous thing, and your parent takes a look at you, and she's in public, most time it's the mother, and she would look at you, and that look has consequences if you continue. So I will instruct you and teach you in the way that you should go. I will guide you with mine eyes. That the eye of the Lord is upon you. You've got to walk the path and walk properly. So that's my favorite scripture.
Smiling Elder Mike, you know why?
Why?
2 weeks ago, I did an interview with a Tobagian,
Uh-huh.
and Evangelist Roger Aline, and that was his favorite text.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's a thing from Chinbago.
I don't know.
But we'll leave that today.
Yes.
What is your favorite hymn?
My favorite hymn, I've got a lot of favorite because I'm a musician, but I will have like 1 week I'll have a favorite, and then another week I will just bump into another song and say, oh, this is beautiful. Yeah, this is nice. So for this past couple weeks, my favorite hymn is There's No Other Name Like Jesus. Dear name, sweet name, dear name. There's no other name like Jesus.
There's no other name like Jesus.
That's right. And it was one of my favorite hymns in my very early, when I just got baptized. The people who were around me when I was reading that Bible Answers book, the people who I spent a lot of time with, that was one of the hymns they would sing when I go to worship with them. Sweet name, dear name, there's no other name like Jesus.
If you could go back in time, if you could change things, anything, what would you have done differently?
I would have become a Seventh-day Adventist since 1981. I left the Army in 1986. But in 1981, when I was training those pathfinders, I was still making excuses because I didn't want to make a commitment to attend community guest day services when I'm invited to by these young people. And so when I became an Adventist in 1987, that is when I reflected and said, oh my goodness, that is what I was missing all these years. And when I was that stand-up comedian in the Army, there was one brother, I never knew he was Adventist, but he was always a Christian brother. We called him, his name was John, Brother John, of course. His Christian demeanor at the camp.
Yes.
Whenever I get obscene in our conversations, military conversations, he would normally stay by his locker, maybe 5 or 6 rows down, and hear me at my worst. And he will say, in a very nasal, nagging voice, Michael, strive for the mastery. Strive for the mastery.
Yes,
and I would just say, on my end, I just say, okay, Brother John, okay. And I'll continue in my wayward behavior. And he will nag again, Michael, strive for the mastery. I never knew what he meant until I read strive for the mastery. I think it's in Corinthians. And I said, oh my goodness, this is how long the Lord has been talking to me to strive for the mastery. But I couldn't, my eyes were darkened I was in a darkened world. So that and my experience with the Pathfinders in 1981, that is like 6 years that I lost. And when I realized how I was backward, what drove me to study with more intent, with more intentionality, was I've wasted years. I need to spend time studying. So I became a very avid reader of the Bible, a very good student of the Bible, and a reader of Ellen White's and her writings. So that's how I fortify myself for the years that were lost. So I could consider those years as years that I lost.
Okay. Your final word. There may be someone who is going to watch this video, this YouTube link, someone who's going to watch the Facebook link, and it is your last opportunity to say to them something that can make a difference in their life. What would be your closing words?
Okay. Solomon, in all his glory, all his splendor, all his wealth, all his fame, did a summary. He said, all is vanity. The life that we chase, the life that is elusive, we run down all these things to get what we believe will make us happy. But all is vanity. So he concluded in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, I think, or chapter 13, the last chapter in Ecclesiastes. If I can look it up, I would read it probably just the last 2 verses. Let me just open my iPad and go to Ecclesiastes, and I will choose that very last, and that's what I would say to that individual. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 12, verse 13 and 14. He says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. This is like my final word to someone who might be watching this program and they might just be inclined to take a little tip from a nobody, somebody like me who is nobody at all. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. And then I would say to them, that's what we are supposed to do. We are supposed to remember our Creator, which is chapter 12, verse 1, in the days of our youth, before the evil days come, when we shall say, we have no pleasure in them. The evil days are the days when you're walking with a limp. So remember the Lord in the days of your youth. Any day is the day of your youth. The evil days are the days when you cannot hear properly, when your hearing is gone, when your vision is gone, when your speech is gone, your ability to speak, when you may have suffered numerous strokes. The evil days are the days when you cannot walk properly, when somebody has to serve you, when you're in a care home and you're just receiving help, you cannot clean yourself, you cannot feed yourself, you cannot take care of yourself. Those are not pleasant days. Those are not the days of your youth in the regular scheme of things. So remember the Creator in the days of your youth before the evil days come, when you shall say, I have no pleasure in them, meaning it's not happiness that I awake this morning to see the new day. When you're feeling pain all over, remember, fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of man. And that's my final word to them.
Brother Mike.
Yes, sir.
It's been a pleasure having you today and share your faith.
Thank
May
you.
God continue to bless you. May God bless your family. We really appreciate you coming forward and sharing not only to us, but to the world. May God be with you and continue to be safe.
You too, my friend Edson. Yes. And thanks for the opportunity. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.